welcome back to Clinical Psychology Community UK. My name is Holly and I am currently a second year trainee clinical psychologist on a course in the UK. And we're halfway through training, which feels mad to say. Today we're going to be talking about research projects on the DClin. So if you have interviews coming up for the DClin, it's good to have a bit of a knowledge around what you might be expected to do research-wise. But this is very specific to my course, but I'm trying to be a bit broad as well. But just bear in mind that my experiences are based on my course. So our aims, what we are going to do is outline research requirements and the process on the DClin, and I'm going to talk about the three different research projects that we have. We have the theory-driven research project, the TDRP, the service improvement project, or the SIP, and the systematic review of the literature, the SRL. And I'm also going to try and put those into context of all the other things that we have to do on the DClin, just so you're aware. And part of this is not just to glamorize being busy or anything like that. It's to make sure that you are aware of everything that goes on in the DClin, because it is a choice to make to do the DClin, and it is super busy and stressful. So let's get into it. Here are the DClin research requirements on my course. Our course is registered as a postgraduate research degree rather than a taught degree. So there are additional research requirements from our university. They kind of stipulate some of the things that we have to do in order to get a postgraduate research degree from the university. There are three research projects, as I said, the theory-driven, the service improvement project, and the systematic review of the literature. And then we have one research portfolio, which is examined by Viva Voce in summer of third year. So this is where we write up all of our different research projects, and we write a connecting narrative as to why we kind of chose to do those projects and what connects them. And then also, I think we have to do executive summaries and things like that. And then we have a Viva, which is kind of like a panel interview where they talk about your research and it's examined. Our research in our course stipulate that it should make a significant and novel contribution to the field of clinical psychology, which is quite a lot to take on, I think. I'm just trying to make sure we get through it. I'm trying not to think too much about the significant and novel at the moment. So the DClin research process then. For each project, you have to think of a research idea. Think of all the different things that you might want to do, areas of interest that you have. Then you discuss with potential supervisors. On our course, they do a research fair. Because we were still in COVID when we started, our research fair was online, which is very difficult to manage because you have lots of different supervisors and they all have different interests, and you're trying to join their rooms, but they're talking to people, and it was a bit difficult to manage, but you know, there wasn't another way of doing it back then. So yes, basically you discuss with the potential supervisors that might have interest in your area of interest, or have done research in that previous area or anything like that. Then you would request some supervisors. So on our course, you rank your three internal and external supervisors in order of preference, and then you get allocated them. And when you're allocated, then you discuss actually what, shaping that idea into a research project. Then you have to, on our course, write and submit a proposal, which depends on the project. But for the systematic review, I think it was 1,000 words. And for the theory-driven research project, it was 3,000. So yeah, you have to write and submit a proposal and then attend a project approval session for each project to discuss how feasible they are for DClin projects. So once you've written your proposal, it gets submitted to a PAS panel, and you then attend, and it's a couple of members of the course team, and possibly someone with lived experience as well, joining that panel to go through your research really. And I've had lots of various experiences with them. So as an outcome, you either get pass unconditionally, which doesn't happen all that often, pass with minor corrections, which gives you 2 weeks to do some kind of little changes to the proposal to pass, and then pass with major corrections, where you have 6 weeks, and if there's kind of more major things that need to happen, and then a fail as well, so that can be refused at PAS. But they are usually very understanding, because to get to PAS, it has to be agreed with your supervisor anyway. So that if it's been refused at PAS, but your supervisor's on board with it, and there's been some sort of breakdown there. So usually they're very understanding and they help you shape another project. So for my outcomes of my three, I had a pass unconditionally for my theory-driven research project. The course director is my supervisor, so that's what you'd expect. My service improvement project got major corrections, and that took that actually took months to finally get through. But the project is a lot better now. So yes, there's that one. And then my systematic review, actually I didn't have to go to a panel. So for your service improvement project and your systematic review, you can do something called a proportionate review, where the research team will look at your proposal and pass it, or ask you to come to panel. So actually my systematic review was passed unconditionally as well. And one of my supervisors is a research supervisor as well. So that is helpful. So yes, you can pass unconditionally, pass with minor corrections, or pass with major corrections, or fail. But yes, as I explained, it's not that bad. Let's move on to the first project then, the theory-driven research project. This is a research study grounded in theory that is testing or exploring hypotheses in a clinically relevant population. Okay, so they ask us to avoid randomized controlled trials because they are massive, and intervention effectiveness studies, as they're quite hard to do within the context of the DClin. There's limited things that we can do really, because firstly time, secondly money, and yeah, it's just, we have so many other things that we need to juggle. So doing an RCT is just not feasible. We just don't have the resource to be able to do that. After the project's been approved by the course, the process is that you agree the details with the supervisors around recruitment and measures and ethics and all of those things. Then you do your sponsorship applications. And I should actually just say the first step can take quite a long time, because even if it's been agreed, there's so many other things that you need to do to prepare for that. So how are you going to, you need to have some thought about how you're going to recruit in your proposal, but not as thorough as actually how are we going to physically recruit, and which measures are we going to use? Can we make sure we can actually use those measures and things? So the second thing, sponsorship applications can also take quite a long time. So that includes a draft ethics application, all study materials, so your information sheet, your consent form, your questionnaires, your posters, anything else that you're going to use to recruit, and your study protocol, exactly what you're going to do. So my sponsorship is by our university, so my study is sponsored by our university, and it took probably 3 months, maybe 4, to get that process completely done. But then it meant that when I submitted for ethics, which is the next step, actually it pretty much went through, which I'll talk about as well. So for your ethics application, you have to have all the same forms that you've prepared for sponsorship, as well as your ethics application fully submitted, all your study materials, sponsorship forms showing that you have sponsorship, and everything like that. Then ethics applications, so they also do something called a proportionate review, where they will look through. So there's 2 different ways you can do it. You can either go through a university research ethics committee, CUK is our one, or you can go through an NHS one if you're recruiting through the NHS. So that's an NHS REC, research ethics committee. Mine went through an NHS REC because I'm recruiting through the NHS, and there are different ways that you can go through that. So they do a proportionate review where they look through and they might pass you straight away, or ask for some different conditions and then give you ethics approval, or they might call you to an ethics panel, which is what happened for me. So they just wanted it to go to a full ethics panel, which is where between 7 and 10 people, members of the research ethics committee, will look at your proposal, look at all your documents, and check ethically that it's okay. And then I got called to my panel, which lasted for like 5 minutes, which it's way less scary than you think it's going to be. I was asked 2 questions that were completely manageable. So yes, not quite as scary, but hopefully my ethics will be coming through soon. Fingers crossed. The next step, once you've got your ethics, and that can be quite a lengthy process as well, not just getting all the documents ready, but waiting for a decision. Because I think particularly in COVID, there was quite a backlog, and lots of ethics applications had to be changed because they couldn't go face to face and all of that stuff. So yes, that can be a while. But then next is recruitment. So how you are going to recruit your participants, either online or through services, etc. Making sure all of those processes are in place and that you're recruiting to your study. Data collection, again, that can be however you're collecting your data, whatever your study is. Data cleaning and analysis, making sure that all the data, working out what you can do with all the missing data if there is missing data, and analysing it appropriately. Data synthesis, this is the most important part, arguably, of this project, is linking it to theory, and how that's all going to work. And then writing it up. So our 3 research projects, we have 3 deadlines throughout the year, which I think I'll come on to later, but we have three deadlines throughout the whole course, not the year, the whole course. And we can choose which project we submit for each one. So we've got a deadline in June 2023, October 2023 and April 2024, and our vivas are due to be in July 2024. So yes, those are the timings. My theory-driven research project is going for the last submission in April 2024, which is quite common because of the extra additional things like ethics applications and sponsorship and recruiting and all of the stuff that you have to do. It tends to be a lengthier process. So my TDRP is looking at the similarities and differences in psychological factors between people with chronic pain and fibromyalgia compared with community controls, because nobody's looked at this. We often clinically separate people with chronic pain and fibromyalgia for treatment because they are different, they present differently, but we actually have no research evidence-based reason for this, as in we don't really know why do we give them different treatment. Why do we give them different psychological treatment? Like, there is no evidence to back that up, even though there's lots of practice-based evidence as to why we do that. There's no research-based evidence, so that's what we're trying to look at. Theory-wise, we're looking at a cognitive behavioural theoretical approach, and the current status was submitted for ethics, but actually no, it's my ethics, I'm just waiting for it to come through at the moment, hopefully. Aiming to submit in April 2024. Now we move on to the service improvement project. So this is a project working with a regional service So now we move on to the service improvement project. This is a project with a regional service to improve an aspect of their service. So recovery rates, improving access for underrepresented populations, engagement, reducing DNAs, did not attends, attrition, those sorts of things. After the project's been approved by the course, the process generally is to agree a timeline with supervisors. Then you need to obtain authorizations from the service and the trust where the SIP is taking place, and access data or begin data collection. So some services come to the research fair saying, we've got this data set, we don't know what to do with it, / we've got this data set, we want it analysed, and this is what we want to look at, which is what happened in my case, luckily. But it might also include you taking in some more data. Usually a mark of a good SIP is some qualitative stuff from people that have gone through the service or are in the service. So interviews, focus groups, surveys, things like that. Data analysis, qual and quant is good, but can just be qual as well. And interpretation, again, linking to that theory and that evidence base as well. Then you need to write it up for the course, and write up for service dissemination. So again, it's writing one up for the course, and then the service or the trust might want a different report because you're not going to be writing in the same way. The service really care about the recommendations. They care about what you found, but they don't care about the statistical analysis in the same detail that the course cares about it as a research degree. So there might be a little bit of tweaking that you need to do when you disseminate that. I think in my case, we're going to be there's quite a few of us doing SIPs in the same service. So I think we're going to try and do like a day where we can present them all, hopefully. So my SIP is looking at why recovery rates are lower for IAPT patients who also have a chronic pain condition. The rationale is that recovery rates are significantly lower than the national target, and significantly lower than for people without chronic pain, significantly lower. So, and this is nationwide. This is not just in that service, it's nationwide. So exploring why rates are lower will hopefully yield suggestions for improvement. Currently, the quantitative data analysis, t-test and regressions compared variables across 2 recovery groups, recovered and not recovered. And the qualitative data collection, last interview to complete. So I wrote this a little while ago. Last interview has now been completed. I have done the data analysis and I'm just currently working through the write-up of it. Yes, so qualitative data analysis was my next step, but I am aiming to submit in June, so I'm hoping to have a draft ready in the next few weeks or so. Now we move on to the systematic review of the literature, which is a review of all available literature on a given topic, synthesized using a theoretical model. It can also include meta-analyses as well. After the project's been approved by the course, the process is agree your timeline with your supervisors as well. Register on Prospero, that's what we are encouraged to do, which is effectively a website where you can look at reviews that are planned, reviews that are ongoing, to make sure that you're not doing the same review that somebody else might be doing, for example. It's not foolproof and not everyone has to register on it, but on the course they advise us to. Then we need to find a buddy, which is another trainee or someone else. If you've got a friend who works in research in that area, they can also help. Another trainee or someone else to help you screen. This is something I had no idea would have to be a thing until I started the course. And also that means not only do we need to find a buddy, someone else, we need to be a buddy for someone else as well. So that's another thing to kind of consider in it all. Then you run your searches, and you do your title and abstract screening, where you're going through the titles and abstracts against some inclusion and exclusion criteria to see which ones can go through. Then you do your full text screening against inclusion and exclusion criteria to see which ones are included and excluded. And then design a data extraction tool. So how you'll go of those included studies, once you've gone through all your screening and you've got your final kind of ones for inclusion, how are you going to how are you going to get the data out of the papers for comparison for tables that you see in reviews? You're going to have to use the data extraction tool. It sounds really fancy. Mine's just an Excel spreadsheet with the things that we've agreed on. And then you're going to do your data extraction and your synthesis, which is really thinking about it in relation to a model and a theory. And then you're going to write it up and hopefully get it published. I mean, that should be said for all of these, actually. With their course really advise us to try and publish them. If not on training, then definitely afterwards. So my SRL is looking at the psychological predictors and outcomes of female genital cosmetic surgery, things like labiaplasty, vaginal rejuvenation. Rationale, nobody has completed this review yet, although this field is emerging. We should have enough papers, but a review will be helpful to make suggestions for future development of this field. And it kind of feels like it's a really good time in the field to be having this sort of review. And it almost feels like we're in a bit of a race with some other researchers that are doing the sort of same thing. So hopefully we can get ours done. And the theoretical model we're using is the cognitive behavioural model of body dysmorphic disorder. And current status, yes, title and abstract screening has been completed. We have created our data extraction tool and full test screening is still ongoing as well. And for that one, I'm aiming to submit in October. So that's my second deadline one. So yes, hopefully I'll have to get moving on that once I've submitted my SIP. Here are some tips for DClin research, because I do think it's important to have an idea of these. And these are just things that have worked for me. People are way better at research than me that go on to doctorates, and you will have your own tips. But these are just some things that really worked for me. Firstly, I keep a log for each research project. It's not fancy. It's just a table on Word that I just type in the date, who I met with and what we discussed, and then any actions. So it really helps me look back, and I think it will be really helpful for Viva if they ask me, why did you make that decision? I can say, oh, actually, we all met, and this is the rationale for why we made those decisions. It also really helps because I think on the DClin, you've got these three things to juggle, as well as placement, as well as teaching, as well as any other academics that you need to do. And sometimes it can be a few months before you've, between doing some work on some projects. So I haven't looked at my review for a couple of months, so I'll need to look back at my log and see what the last thing was that I agreed and planned. So that is like a no-brainer for me. I couldn't do it without it. So give it a go if it's helpful. Then I would also encourage you to think of some ideas that you have a genuine interest in, because you are going to be spending quite a lot of time with that literature and hours doing forms and reviewing the forms and looking at theories and all of that stuff. So it really should be something you care about, because if you care about it, you might still have a chance of caring about it at the end. Whereas if it's something you don't care about, you absolutely won't care about it at the end. Thirdly, try and research similar fields for two of the projects. So this is something actually our course advises, and two of mine are in pain, because I had my first placement in pain, and actually my third placement touched on pain as well. So there's a lot of reading hours that I've saved myself because I've been looking at the pain literature. So that is definitely something that's really helpful. Don't have to, but I just wanted a bit of an easier life. If I can make it easier a little bit, then I'll try. And fourthly, keep an eye on the deadlines. I mean, the course makers do a Gantt chart, which is basically you have tasks on one side and then you have dates on the other, and you just show when you're going to do certain things. And it's like a planning tool. But things like to-do lists and calendars and planners can be really helpful. And the log is also good for that because you can have the deadline on there. And yeah, keeping an eye on the deadlines is important, but also it's that balance between keeping an eye and not getting too overwhelmed by it, because if you're too overwhelmed by it, it's going to be really stressful, and it's already stressful enough. So those are my tips. I just wanted to talk about the other assignments and the context, because I think hearing that, I think it quickly breeze through all of those things, and I think it can make it sound, oh yeah, just do this project, and it's not that. There is a lot that goes into it, and you have to consider it alongside all the context. So in year one, academic wise, on our course, we had an extended essay, which is a 2-day timed assignment. So we get the essay titles at 9 a.m. on day 1, and we submit it by 5 p.m. on day 2. And it's usually something to do with, it's kind of models something you might be asked to do in actual practice. Something like a new report has come out on, I don't know, mental health in children. How can you improve mental health in your current service or something, or how can you, it'll be something like that, something clinically sort of related. And then we have research. So in the first year, we have to have ideally all of our 3 research projects proposals written and panels had. So they all need to be approved by the end of first year is the plan. And then we have on our course the systemic foundation course, which I think is optional, but it's not a huge amount of extra work, so a lot of people do it. We had to keep a reflexive log for 6 months, which is a minimum of 1 entry every month, just kind of reflecting on things related to systemic ideas. It could be reflecting on a book we'd read, or a TV show we'd watched, or a conversation we'd had, or a systemic teaching we'd had, or something like that. Then secondly, we did, and this is the one that changes every year, we did an interview with a non-clinical family, and we practiced writing up a genogram, which is kind of like a family tree, and we reflected on that. Thirdly, we did a theoretical essay. So this was the only thing that kind of decided whether we passed the foundation course or not. The reflexive log and the interview weren't formative assignments. So the theoretical essay was kind of discussing systemic ideas. In year 2, and also, of course, year 1, that's all on top of 2 placements as well. And it could be 3 placements if you're split, or, but it's on top of placements as well, and teaching. Year 2, academic-wise, we had a 1-day timed assignment, which was a critical review of a journal article. We were able to choose a journal article out of about 5 or 6, maybe 4, and critique it as if we were doing a peer review, basically. So yeah, that was a 1-day assignment, 9 to 5. Research-wise, we have 1 project due in the June, and we need to start conducting all of the projects. Basically, we need to start doing all of them. There is an optional, and it is kind of competitive in the fact that only 10 or 11 in our cohort, so only a third of us, could do the intermediate course. And that includes 2 reflexive logs, a log of independent study, presentation of practice, assessed family practice rating scale, a caseload log, a theoretical essay, a case report, a video case presentation, including a short essay. You might be able to tell in my tone, I chose not to do that. Again, if I can make anything slightly easier, I will. And I found the systemic stuff slightly difficult to engage in the first year, so I chose not to do it in the second year. So yes, but if you are doing that, then that is a whole load of other stuff to do as well. And again, this is on top of placement as well, and teaching. So in year 3 then, academic-wise, we have a consultancy project, which is kind of like a mini-SIP. And they say that it should take 20 days, 20 placement days of work. So sort of however many weeks that is. So however many weeks that is. In reality, apparently it takes quite a lot longer than that. But yeah, effectively you are working with a service to improve something, or they have a question about how something's working, and you go in as a kind of consultant and interview staff or patients, and you kind of work out what's happening, and then you make some recommendations, and you work with the service to make an improvement, basically. So that is the third year academic. Research wise, we have the remaining 2 projects due, one in October and one in April. We also have the research portfolio due with the connecting narrative, and we also have a Viva Voce. So those are those things. And again, third year, we have the placement stuff, we still have the teaching stuff, all of that. So as you can see with the placements, we have placement 1 and placement 2, all of the same things. It's going to be all the same here in terms of placements. So all the same stuff needs to happen. So we have 6 placements, but usually in third year it's 1 placement, but you still have to do 5 and 6 in terms of the work, if that makes sense. So even if you're doing 1 long placement, so you're only doing 5 placements theoretically, you still have to do a mid-placement review in your placement 5. So the first 6 months counts as placement 5 and the last 6 months counts as placement 6. So you still have to do all of that stuff. You still have to do your logbook, your mid-placement review, your end-of-placement review, your observations, and your formal assessments and your case report as well. So yes, there's a lot to be doing. Actually, I think maybe your last one you don't have to do a case report. Actually, I'm just thinking now. I think your last one you might not have to do one. Could be lying, but I don't think you do. So yes, there's a lot of other things going on. So in year 1, you've got this, all of this stuff. In year 2, you've got all of this, and in year 3, you've got all of that. So it's quite a lot. It is quite a lot. And if you want, take a screenshot or save this, because it is helpful to see how the structure works as well. And of course, we also have teaching as well. And you're also asked to sit on committees. They like to have training representation on every single committee. So it could be the people with experience group. It could be practice and placements. It could be the admissions committee, the general committee. It could be any of them. So you're expected to sit on those as well. And you may be asked to buddy up with some other trainees in other years, or provide support on interview days, provide videos for the course to be able to explain what the course does, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. I'm really grateful for everyone for watching. Thank you for coming back again and again, and I really hope this has been helpful to understand how research works on the DClin, because it's one of my most requested videos. And I hope you all take care, and good luck for interview season if you are interviewing. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.